Recording now.
Awesome. Well, good evening, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Ask the Doctor. Tonight, we are going to deal with some stigmas around something called herpes and something that sometimes makes people a little uncomfortable. So, we're going to learn a little bit more about that tonight. We are super, super lucky, as usual, to have the man of the hour. He has trained, taught, lectured doctors all over the world, and he's here to teach us tonight. So don't forget to put your questions in the chat so we can talk to you at the end. Without any further ado, the amazing Dr. Bob Rakowski.
All right. Well, Carol, thank you always, and happy, beautiful, amazing evening. This topic actually just came up today. It was literally an ask the doctor question. I had a colleague reach out to me and he said, Dr. Bob, we're seeing an extreme amount. Let me stop that. He says, we're seeing an extreme amount of people coming in with viral outbreaks, especially herpes outbreaks. Do you have anything to offer these people? And I said, wow, what an awesome question. And the answer is absolutely yes. And then I thought, well, why don't we create an Ask the Doctor about that? So as I don't necessarily buy into Murphy's Law, but it's an amazingly busy time of year for people that are really providing healthcare. And I'm wrapping up a very busy day. So I didn't put all the references that I want, but I'll certainly answer all questions that people have. So one of the questions about viruses and even microbes is, how many of them are out there? And the numbers are beyond staggering from really good references. So here is the number: 10 quintillion virus. Now they're calling them particles rather than real virus beings, because there's still a debate about whether or not viruses are living entities. I'll show you a picture in a matter of minutes, but one of the properties of living organisms is replication. And so as I've told my patients for decades at this point, when a virus wants to start a family, it doesn't, find a cute little virus of the opposite sex and say, hey, let's have little viruses. What it does is it takes its genetic material, inserts it into your genetic material, and uses your cells to make copies. So when you look at these references, and Science News Magazine, very popular magazine, notice that it says most identified DNA sequences floating in our blood belong to viruses. There's a bunch of them. So it's not us against them, it's us with them. And how big is a quintillion? Well, for you, those of you that aren't math majors, we go from thousands to millions to billions to trillions to quadrillions to quintillions. So it's a matter of a million trillions to get to a quintillion. That's a lot. And so if we didn't have a good defense against viruses, we would have been gone long ago. So this is actually a picture of a viral infected cell. The virus will actually get into the cell. That might be worth talking about for a moment too, because people know that if they were to get something called a hepatitis virus, that's going to be a liver virus, and it can be very bad. It only affects the liver. So why does it affect the liver and not the kidneys or the lungs or the heart or the brain? Well, there's a very specific receptor on the liver cell that allows the virus to get in. And once in, it merges the genetic information. So this is a picture of a viral infected cell where the cells are actually making the copies of the viruses. Now, what happens when the cell gets sick enough? Well, it actually bursts, and then the viruses can go out and they can infect other cells. Now, I just had that picture conveniently when I was looking for the picture of a viral infected cell. And notice what it says. It says autoantibody, that would be antibodies against your own tissue, increase with age. And the activation might be stimulated by persistent infection with viruses, such as maybe Epstein-Barr virus. Now, Epstein-Barr is a herpes virus. There's over 200 different named and numbered herpes viruses. So they're not too terribly unusual. And probably half of us watching this Zoom right now actually have or have been infected with this Epstein-Barr virus. So what does your immune system do with a viral infected cell? Well, it actually attacks it. That's what it should do. For whatever reason, I'm going to just stop for a second my screen share because I don't like the way my screen is sharing. So I'm going to do that again. One moment, please. Get back to that and bring that back. So we see plenty of people that have chronic infections. And does that chronic infection potentially lead to autoimmunity? Potentially it can. Carol, when I share this, do you see anything but the screen, just out of curiosity?
I can see your slides. I can see you moving your mouse around it.
Something's unique about how this is displaying. All right, I'll just be happy with that then. There we are. All right, so we'll keep going on then with this topic. So there have been a lot of questions, throughout human history, and especially this last couple of years, about mutations. And so you can Google this yourself. And so do viruses mutate to a more or less virulent form, deadly form? And the conventional wisdom is if viruses became more deadly, they would actually jeopardize their own existence. So if a virus kills its host, well, then it has no place to live and it's going to die. And therefore, it is not in the virus's best interest. So here's the first thing that came up when I typed in that search, and I just took a screenshot. The pervasive claim that a virus will mutate to become more virulent, more aggressive, more toxic, more deadly during an outbreak is particularly illustrative of this phenomena, even though the specter of super killer viruses is baseless. In reality, the evolution of virulence is a highly complex topic that has inspired extensive research on evolutionary theory and debate. But the bottom line is absolutely not. When viruses mutate, it's in their best biologic interest, and everything wants to survive, to become less aggressive. Then we start looking at pandemics, and there have been a few throughout history, and the Black Death probably the biggest. But if you look at the Black Death, what was that caused by? Very, very toxic streets. I have a lecture on that, but there's a picture of the London streets, and it says the streets were narrow and overflowing with sewage. And that's how that toxicity brought in the rats, brought in the fleas, brought in the virus. And when they cleaned up the environment, well, then the viral outbreak went away. So Louis Pasteur on his deathbed said, you know what, I was wrong. The microbe is nothing. The terrain, the biologic terrain, the internal environment is absolutely everything. And, I share this with patients all the time. When this fish is sick, change the water, change the terrain. So now we'll talk about some very proven antiviral therapies. And vitamin D is big. It's good for every cell of the body. It's good for the brain. It is an essential nutrient. But by the way, we also can make vitamin D if we get outside and get good sunshine on good, healthy skin and have a good, healthy liver. But there have been, people in public health positions that have said, look, your three best defenses against the most recent virus include vitamin D, vitamin D, and vitamin D. Well, it certainly makes my top three, but I'm not going to make it all three. It's a very important prevention. So there's your pathway to make vitamin D. Get some good sun, touching actually your skin, which doesn't have sunscreen. And then the liver and kidneys working together will make vitamin D. Zinc is very, very important as well. And notice that it can block replication of the virus. So zinc is very important. Zinc turns out to be a nutrient that is profoundly deficient in our population. I do a very simple zinc test. It's called the zinc tally test. And it's about 19 out of 20 that fail the test miserably. Longer discussion there, but our bodies are actually fairly full of heavy metals. The medical literature agrees with that. Modern skeletons have 500 to 1,000 times the lead of pre-industrialized humans. And when zinc is in the body, it can help to clear these heavy metals, and therefore heavy metals will deplete zinc. So notice zinc can enhance antiviral immunity, especially in the immunocompromised and the elderly. And so zinc, we want to make sure that people are taking it if they have a viral concern. Vitamin C and quercetin, they both have gotten a lot of press. Quercetin is a bioflavonoid, And I'm going to give my own spin on that in just a minute. But notice that this Frontiers of Immunology, a peer-reviewed medical journal, says that they synergistically work together for both prevention and treatment of this popular virus. But here's an interesting fact. There are thousands, plural, of naturally occurring bioflavonoids. They give fruits and vegetables their wonderful colors. So one of my rules about good nutrition is every color, every day. Every color, every day. You'll get these different bioflavonoids. And I promise you, if you take them in synergy, that's the magic of nature. It always works better together. And by the way, notice they said vitamin C and one bioflavonoid. Well, don't you think there's some vitamin C in those nice citrus fruits as well as those bioflavonoids? So someone asked me specifically about genital herpes, and I tell a story, but there are 13 different studies about Ganoderma and herpes, including the form that, they say people will give people a scarlet letter. In fact, I'll tell that story now. So I had a police officer come to see me about a decade ago. And he came in and says, Dr. Bob, I've got great news and not so great news. I said, okay, cool. What's the great news? He says, well, I met the love of my life. I'm getting married next month. I said, that's awesome. So what could be not so great? He says, well, Bob, I've got herpes and I have such a high stress job. Even though I take antiviral drugs, I almost always keep an outbreak. So he says, can you help me? Well, my answer is always the same to that. I don't know, but I'll try. But, we gave him the vitamin D, we gave him the zinc, we gave him the Ganoderma. We gave him vitamin C. I think we gave him colostrum back then. And we gave him a pretty intense protocol, and he put this into complete and total remission. Had a great wedding, had a great honeymoon, stayed on the protocol for maybe 2 months, and then just plain stopped. That's what a lot of people do. Well, the interesting thing is he continued drinking a Ganoderma-infused coffee, and a decade later, he still hasn't had an outbreak. So is he cured? I don't know, but he's quite happy, and he hasn't had an outbreak, and that's really awesome. Shingles, they call this post-herpetic because shingles, herpes zoster, the chickenpox virus, can be very, very painful and horrible for people. But in this very small medical study, 100% of the people taking Ganoderma and ginseng had complete and total remission and no recurrence 1 year later. Last week, I apologize for double booking Ask the Doctor. I actually thought that I could have a dual purpose, or was that 2 weeks ago? Maybe it was last week. But I was hired by a nutrition company to talk about activated omega-3s, known as specialized pro-resolvent mediators. And I love them. They're part of my Magnificent 7 nutrient protocol. But notice that this is very powerful. Activated omega-3s are powerful antivirals. And this PubMed calls out the flu, herpes, respiratory syncytial virus, HIV, hepatitis C, and even the virus that we don't name. So very, very powerful remedies that are readily available. And 9 different studies on, very simply, herpes simplex virus. So Ganoderma lucidum improves recovery time of that herpes. Ganoderma, by the way, can even block replication of the HIV virus. When I put people on a complete immune protocol, I let people know that we want balance. We don't want to have an overattack on like allergy or autoimmunity or an under-response like infection or cancer. And all things shown on this slide are proven to have immune balancing benefits. This was an interesting study that is fairly recent, where they looked at a number of things that are powerful inhibitors against the virus that we can't mention. Very good peer-reviewed article. Interestingly enough, when I posted it on social media, the fact checkers knocked it down. And so we have to wonder why that's happening. But here's the first thing I did when this virus came out. People were saying, Dr. Bob, there's a bad virus coming. Can we do anything about it? And I said, okay, well, if it's SARS-CoV-2, why don't we look and see what was effective against SARS-CoV-1? And if you start the list here and keep going down, 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 down. At one time I counted, I think 37 of them, realized that they found 37 different agents thereabout that were powerful against the first version. So wouldn't it make sense that we would have started looking at all of these things regarding this version? And I think as time shows, many of these things have already been found to have been effective. And who knows, maybe all of them are. And interesting enough, chloroquine was getting some bad press, but that was found to be very effective against the first version of SARS. When we start talking about the evolution of immunity, understand 10 quintillion viruses, they suggest that viruses preceded bacteria, preceded mammals, certainly preceded humans. So they probably were here before us. And there was a method of immunizing people called variolation. And what they would do is they would take people that had smallpox and they would take a pustule and they would cut it open and then they would scratch the pus material into people that they wanted to prevent smallpox on. Now, this simple process had about a 98% success rate. Now, 2% would get smallpox, and apparently, some of those people would die. So that was a bad thing. But I found it interesting when this book came out, they said smallpox, death of a disease. And they said in just a decade of the global smallpox vaccine program, that's why smallpox went away. But after bioterrorism was a risk after 9/11, this was an article from the New England Journal of Medicine. And notice what it says. Long before the World Health Organization smallpox eradication program began, and despite low herd immunity, unsophisticated public health facilities, and repeated introductions, smallpox disappeared from many countries as they developed economically. And then they mentioned all these countries where it just plain disappeared without a vaccine. So, well, how in the world did that happen? Well, there's a simple answer. Healthy bodies don't get sick. They cleaned up the environment. People started doing better, lower stress, better nutrition, lower toxins. And that is the answer to probably, this may go down as the worst virus in history, or maybe HIV is. So fascinating enough, October 12, 1768, we're going back quite a bit. Catherine the Great got the variolation treatment. That meant someone had smallpox, they took a pustule, they cut it open, and they scratched it into Catherine the Great's arm. Good news is she did okay with that. So now, Jenner gets a lot of credit about the smallpox issue because he realized that when people got cowpox, they often didn't get smallpox. And he thought that would be safer than the smallpox exposure, the variolation. And you know what? He was right. Cowpox was very mild, and it turned out to be similar enough. So he actually used the cowpox pustules. There's a treatment called convalescent plasma. This was the very first Nobel Prize in medicine. And there was a very bad flu going on. And what this guy decided was, you know what, why don't we take blood from people that beat a bad virus, spin off the plasma, that's the liquid portion, and infuse it into other people and see what happens. That was the very first Nobel Prize in medicine. And notice that they used it effectively against the 1918 flu, measles, Ebola. And there were two studies with this current virus, both that had 100% success rate. So interestingly enough, a lot of people came back from the Gulf War with what they called the Gulf War syndrome. I treated a guy this year, and in fact, I did a Facebook Live with him because he got so much better so fast. But let's look at this. It says Gulf War syndrome is virtually indistinguishable from the classic amyotrophic lateral sclerosis. That's Lou Gehrig's disease, except for the age of onset. Then we pass forward, and this is a peer-reviewed medical study. Stephen Hawking is one of the most famous people ever to have had Lou Gehrig's disease. But notice what this PubMed said. Possible causes of the Gulf War syndrome include several of the adjuvants in the anthrax vaccine and others, the most likely culprit being aluminum hydroxide. So aluminum is the most abundant neurotoxic element on the planet. And when injected into animals, they used this was a rabbit study, it would actually kill the rabbit brain cells. So probably not a good idea to inject aluminum. But then let's go to cdc.gov, vaccine ingredients, aluminum, mercury, formaldehyde. And I think it's a good thing that people are beginning to question, I wonder what they're recommending that we inject and why is it in there? And I think that we will continue to question that. And they also put in stem cells from aborted fetal tissue. So not sure why that's there either. Paul Stamets, he had a podcast on bioterrorism and mushrooms. They call him Mushroom Man. He's got a TED Talk entitled 6 Ways Mushrooms Will Save the World. But when there was an anthrax scare, they asked Paul Stamets, hey, listen, do you think mushrooms might be able to help against anthrax? And sure enough, he found that anthrax, smallpox, other things in mushrooms. And so we like mushroom enhanced things that people do every day, like coffee, tea, hot chocolate, etc. So quite simply, prevention trumps cure. If you can prevent a viral infection, awesome, but there's nothing better than natural immunity. The main players that I like, medicinal mushrooms, Ganoderma, vitamin C, vitamin D, zinc, bioflavonoids, plenty of information of a lot of things that can be very, very helpful against viruses. So with that said, my beautiful friend Carol, did anybody type any questions in the chat, or does anybody have any questions now?
Well, we do have one question in the chat, and I'm happy to see a face smiling I haven't seen in a while. Mr. Claudio will probably have questions for us. Welcome back, Claudio. Grace asks us, what toxins can tattoos introduce to your body?
I can't say I've studied that, but I would suggest that there's going to be a difference between a super high quality tattoo with high quality ink and an artist that has studied this type of thing and someone who hasn't. I've personally seen people that have had some very bad reactions to tattoos, and so I'll quote Ogmandino in his book, The Greatest Salesman in the World. He says, and most of all, I love myself, for when I do, I will zealously inspect all things that I allow to enter my heart, my soul, my body, and spirit. So ultimately, you want to know what's being tattooed on you and look at that. And if someone were considering a tattoo, why not get a small area first to make sure that your body does okay with it before going much bigger? That would be my advice. So hadn't studied it. Plenty of people seem to be fine. I would say quality matters. So you want to check that out and probably start small, and whatever materials you're going to use, make sure you're consistent if you decide to go bigger with it.
Perfect. Ralph asks, Dr. Bob, can you expand on the benefits of omega-3 resolvents? Is there a particular brand that you would recommend?
Well, there's more people that have it now. So keep in mind, I've been a paid lecturer for Metagenics for nearly 3 decades. And they were not the originator, but they had the partnership with the Nobel Prize nominated research from Harvard, Dr. Sirhan, that made the discovery and found a way to make these resolvents outside the body. And I'm going to expand a little bit, Ralph. And so I like Metagenics brand, and they've done comparisons with other brands claiming gram for gram 300% greater absorption and efficacy. And they showed me the data. So I was very excited about that. But I was a co-lecturer at the conference where Dr. Sirhan at the time was nominated for a Nobel Prize, and he was sharing his omega resolvent research. And so back then, right then at that conference, I started looking at resolvents. And, I'll have people in my brain, I'll have a complicated case, and, whatever's going on with them, I might just go, okay, this is a new piece of data. Let's go and see if resolvents have been studied against that. And sure enough, it was studied against spinal cord injury, and it was studied against autoimmunity, and it was studied against diabetes, and it was studied against depression. And when I listened to Dr. Sirhan, and here's what he said, they first found out that, when healthy people are injured, infected, intoxicated, whatever, their healthy body converts omega-3s to a whole new series of molecules that were named resolvents. And the reason they were called resolvents is because all of these conditions resolved faster when people were better at making them. Well, ultimately, he realized that some people and less healthy people make less resolvents. Some people are so unhealthy, they don't make any. So Dr. Sirhan said, well, okay, if the body can make it, maybe we can come up with a series of enzymes in the lab and outside of the body convert omega-3s to resolvents and give them to people orally. So he did that. Then he patented the process. If it were a drug discovery, he would have won a Nobel Prize. But now, if you go to PubMed and resolvents or specialized pro-resolvent mediators, over 2,000 PubMed studies. They are immune modulators. They enhance the efficacy of cancer therapies while protecting normal cells, very similar to Ganoderma. They're antiviral, they're antibacterial. Notice that reference I showed, they even showed they were good for HIV, et cetera, et cetera. So this is a very exciting discovery. And sometimes we have a little dose of insight that turns out to be pretty good. After I was at that conference, I said, you know what, I'm going to put every patient on these. And I hadn't stopped. People's results were better. And that's what we're all about. We're all about better. And so I like Metagenics Form. They've been compared against other companies. I don't think they've been compared against all the competition, but certainly the ones they were compared against, they turned to be out a much, much better deal.
Awesome. Now, I do not have any other questions in the chat yet. Claudio, do you have something for me?
By the way, any questions, fair game. Doesn't have to be virus or anything like that.
Yeah, I'd actually like to, Greg, I'm just so happy to see everybody's beautiful faces. And yes, especially Dr. Bob's. I just wanted to add, I read a few study or heard a study on formaldehyde many years ago. In a third world country, they don't use preservatives. So when the body dies, it starts to decompose almost instantly. Here in North America, because of all the formaldehyde that we ingest in all the preservatives and all the foods that we eat, our body doesn't start to decompose until about 72 hours later. So now, having said that, if it's preserving our body, it's also preserving our body from getting resolved from what we're trying to do, and delaying, I guess.
Well, on no list is it an essential nutrient, and on every list it's a known toxin. So, we might just begin to ask that question. But, Claudia, what you just said, I first heard that at a seminar many, many years ago from a very powerful researcher named Dan Murphy. But rather than calling out formaldehyde specifically, he said preservatives in general. There's just so many of them that we get compared to the rest of the world. One of my mentors in terms of food, he said, eat food that rots, but eat it before it does. And then he would jokingly say, if you put a Twinkie in the trunk of your car for a decade and you open it up, it looks the same, it smells the same, it tastes the same. So even the bugs won't eat it, even the mold won't eat it. So that might be something to think about.
Well, that gave me something to think about next time I look in the cupboard. Anybody else have any questions tonight? You don't need to type it in, just put your hand up. Let's give the man some questions.
By the way, when we talk about preserving food, how about freezing it? Remember that water is life, but dehydration is a major factor in preserving food as well, and so is salt. And these are things that have stood the test of time without causing problems. Now having taught nutrition around the world for more than 3 decades, no one agrees on the best diet, because the best diet is going to depend on the person, their goals, their ancestry, everything else. But we do agree on the worst diet, and it's called the standard American diet. And I think even you Canadians are exposed to that one as well. So And we even have someone from the UK on the line. So, you know, it's not the best thing. I remember when I was in Barcelona, Spain, and I waited in line for 2 hours to go to it's the Gaudi church. Gaudi was the name of the architect because everything he did was Gaudi. And what a monument, and how amazing. And I stood in line for 2 hours and it was worth every moment. But the worst part of the 2 hours was seeing a McDonald's and a Kentucky Fried Chicken and a Burger King, you know, on the same street as this, well, this monument to God, this, you know, pretty powerful stuff. So very interesting. So the American way, we have some good things, but certainly not our diet.
Are you all going to be quiet tonight? They missed you. They're all dumbfounded tonight. They don't know what else to say.
You know, I may just because my day did what my day did, which was a very busy day. There was other things I wanted to put together. I'm probably going to put together a short YouTube. Here's what a virus is. Here's what it does. Here's why we don't need to worry about viruses if we're healthy. And that's part of what I wanted to share with you. Remember that 10 quintillion, 1 million trillion viruses, and they're part of us. That's just it. They're part of the ecosystem, and they're not a problem. And what happens when viruses mutate? Throughout human history, they become less virulent. If that weren't the case, we'd be dead. If they got worse and worse and worse, we'd have been dead so long ago. But that's not the issue. They don't get worse. They become more mild, and then a complete and total non-issue. I was on earlier. I had a Zoom earlier today, and you know, someone asked the question, why is this virus not such a big problem in Africa? And other people asked the question, well, why was it such a big problem in Italy? And Oxford audited the cases, and it's because they inflated the numbers by 10x. 9 out of 10 people that were called deaths from the virus died from something else. And they don't even know if they had the virus or not. And the US said, well, we're not going to be outdone. 15 of 16 deaths that were called virus deaths weren't it. They were from something else. And that really got press when a guy was on a motorcycle and took a semi in a head-on collision. And when he was creamed, cause of death, COVID. So, you know, enough's enough, right? So zealously inspect everything. Be very careful about what you put in your body, mind, and spirit. And let's share all goodness with the world. And we have plenty of good to share. So if that wraps up tonight, I'm always honored to share. We've got one more before the end of the year. If you have questions, send them, and I will certainly create it.
We have another question.
Go for it.
Can you tell if the citrus pectin will totally nullify the vaccine, or will it get rid of the negative effects of the vaccine?
Well, let's go to the developer of the vaccine. Dr. Robert Malone is the guy that actually created it. So let's look and see what Dr. Malone says.
I stand by this.
So I'll do a share screen. And there it is.
I don't usually read from a prepared speech, but this is so important that I wanted to make sure that I got every single word and fact, scientific fact, correct. I stand by this statement with a career dedicated to vaccine research and development. I'm vaccinated for COVID, and I'm generally pro-vaccination. I've devoted my entire career to developing safe and effective ways to prevent and treat infectious diseases. After this, I'll be posting the text of this statement so that you can share it with your friends and family. Here's the thing. Before you inject your child, a decision that is irreversible, I wanted to let you know the scientific facts about this genetic vaccine, which is based on the RNA vaccine technology I created. There are three main issues that parents need to understand before they take this irrevocable decision. The first is that a viral gene will be injected into your parent's cells. This gene forces your child's body
When he says parent cells, he means the cells of the individual injected, not the parents, but the person that's injected.
To make toxic spike proteins. These proteins often cause permanent damage in children's critical organs. These organs include their brain and nervous system, their heart and blood vessels, including blood clots, their reproductive system, and most importantly, this vaccine can trigger fundamental changes to their immune system. The most alarming point about this is that once these damages have occurred, they are irreparable. They cannot be reversed. You can't fix the lesions within their brains. You cannot repair heart tissue scarring. You cannot repair a genetically reset immune system. And this vaccine can cause reproductive damage that could affect future generations of your family. The second thing you need to know is about the fact that this novel technology has not been adequately tested. We need at least 5 years of testing and research before we can really understand the risks associated with this new technology. The harms and risks from new medicines often become revealed many years later. I ask you to ask yourself, as a fellow parent, if you want your child to be part of the most radical experiment in human history. One final point. The reason they're giving you to vaccinate your child is a lie. Your children represent no danger to their parents or grandparents. It's actually the opposite. Their immunity after getting COVID is critical to save your family, if not the world, from this disease. Finally, in summary, there's no benefit for your children or your family to be vaccinating your children against the small risks of the virus, given the known health risks of the vaccine that as a parent, you and your children may have to live with for the rest of your lives. The risk-benefit analysis is not even close with this vaccine for children. As a parent and grandparent, my strong recommendation to you is to resist and fight to protect your children.
So pretty powerful statement. I'm gonna copy that link and put it in the chat if anybody wants it. So I know that didn't answer the question about does citrus pectin bind spike protein, does it get all of it? The answer is nobody knows. It seems to have some benefit, but the guy who created the vaccine says it is irreversible. And we won't know the damage for a long, long time. When I played that for a few patients today and someone asked, well, why the heck did he get it? Hey, listen, when he's dedicated his life to it, it's okay for him at 70 something to sign up for a medical experiment. He created it. That's informed consent. Giving it to a 12-year-old without their parent knowing because they bribed him with ice cream, those people will have to answer for those actions, and I don't know when, but sooner's better than later as far as I'm concerned. Any other questions?
I believe one just got put in the chat. Let me just go back here. What is anca vasculitis? Is it caused by the jab?
I don't know. I've got to look that one up. So we have something like 70,000+ named medical diagnoses. I'm gonna just go and look it up real quick. And by the way, so here's what I do. And by the way, I should use DuckDuckGo now because I don't want to support Google. But So let me share my screen. And here's what I do. Where's DuckDuckGo? DuckDuckGo. Let's see. Does that give me what I need? Okay. I think I can search on that. I'm just learning how to use this now. But what I do is I type in this, what he just asked about, and then etiology. So I don't care what it's called. First of all, vasculitis, there's some type of inflammatory process of the vessels. I have no idea what anca is, but I'm going to look that up. And I want to figure out what causes it. So now here's what it says, genetic and rare diseases. That's one of the first thing that it says. So I'm seeing all these people, I shouldn't say all, but a whole bunch of people that are diagnosed with these crazy rare diseases. So subtypes, anti-neutrophil, cytoplasmic antibody associated whatever name is. So, so if people are born with it and they get it as a kid, well, then we'd say it's genetic. If it came on later, I'd say, wait a minute, why didn't, if they were, if they had it, if they were born with it, why did it wait until they were 40 before it started? So let me look at the incidence of it. Let's see how common it is. Okay, 200 to 400 cases per million people. So that would probably qualify as rare. And by the way, when we ask the question about genetics, and I'll even pull up genetics and addiction, because I started looking at that as well. Maybe I'll go addiction plus environment. I found this to be very, very, very fascinating, and I'm gonna do a new share in a moment. Oh, new share. So when we start looking at genes, here's what the experts say about cancer. 90 to 95% of it is the environment, 5 to 10% is genes, and that appears to be most things. And so when you start looking at addictions, they actually would make rats addicted to morphine. And they'd put them in a lonely room and they'd give them a choice of morphine or water. And when they were lonely, they would drink morphine. But then they created like a rat playground where they had plenty of socialization, good food, good toys, good community. And notice what it says, in rat utopia, rats rarely drank no morphine and never overdosed. So the environment was a big factor in the decision. Then they started looking at the Vietnam era. And when soldiers returned home, 20% of them became heroin addicts in Vietnam. And they said, holy cow, we're going to have a huge problem with heroin addicts. But when they got home and they were in their environment with their family, guess what? 95% of them recovered without issue at all. And notice what it says, only 1% became re-addicted. So how important is the environment? It's absolutely critical. I don't know why I put the serenity prayer. Oh, probably because it's Alcoholics Anonymous. And I love this prayer, right? So we start with the beginning. God grant me the serenity to accept things I cannot change, the courage to change the things that I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. And I heard a person on a podcast, I wish I knew who to give it credit to, but he says, I like this version better. God grant me the serenity to accept the people I cannot change, the courage to change the one that I can, and the wisdom to know it's me. So, these rare genetic diseases, how much are the genes? 5 to 10%. How much are the choices we make? 90 to 95%. So, can we do things about vasculitis? Sure. Can we do things about, inflammatory reaction overall? Of course. Can we nourish the body, calm things down? Absolutely. We do it all the time. So is it caused by the jab? Well, who knows? The jab is bad for a lot of things. When you genetically modify a person, their immune system can go haywire. I'm going to suggest that of the people that I have that have been jabbed, better than 90% have developed autoimmunity. Now, that's probably a good thing. Their body says, whoa, I don't want to be a spike protein factory, so I'm going to kill every cell that's making the spike proteins, and they have measurable antibodies against their own cells. Hopefully they win. But what if the antibodies are against the brain or the heart or a life critical system? Well, maybe those are the people that have already died. I don't know. Plenty of them have. That's for sure.
Okay, so Devin put that in the Accelerator Facebook chat. So that will help a lot of people. And that appears to be the end of our questions. So I'm going to go out on a limb here and wish everybody a Merry Christmas, and hope that you all have as many blessings as you possibly can. And we'll meet back before the new year, which
Yes,
believe me, I am looking forward to, aren't I, Bob?
Yes, you are. And you know what, Carol, I predict a phenomenal, amazing, epic 2022 for you. And know that you're loved. If we can all give Carol our wonderful hearts of love and appreciation. She had, one heck of a challenging year. She lost her mom to very tragic circumstances, and God bless her beautiful soul and your wonderful family. So, all right. Good night, all, and God bless.
Thanks, Carol. Thanks,
Merry
Dr.
Christmas,
Bob.
everyone.
Merry
God bless.
Christmas,
Merry
everybody.
Christmas to all.
Thank you.